Hey, this is Tucker with your high frequency words for the new SAT list number 8. Our first word is adequate. This is an adjective, so it's a describing word, and it describes someone or something that has sufficient qualifications to perform a specific task, to meet a specific purpose. So you might choose a tool that's adequate to do a particular job. Or I think about this often when somebody is applying for a job, they submit a resume to a company, and somebody in that company looks over the resume to figure out, does this person have adequate education, adequate training, adequate experience to be able to do this job well? The second word is bittersweet, and the word itself reveals its meaning a little because bitter sounds like kind of a negative word, sweet sounds positive, and so bittersweet is an adjective that describes anything, any experience that is tinged with a feeling of sadness. So the experience itself might be really positive, but there's just something about it that makes you a little bit sad. And so, for example, if you go to a movie and you love the movie, it's really a fantastic movie, but something in it just kind of breaks your heart a little bit, it makes you sad, maybe you're even crying, you're still enjoying watching the movie, but it's kind of bittersweet because you might leave the theater feeling kind of sad about a character who died or some moment in the movie that just, it was tinged with sadness for you. Clout is a noun, and this means, or it's anything that, anybody with clout has like a special advantage or unusual amount of power. So often I think of people in government having a lot of clout, particularly like if you think about the Supreme Court, the members of the Supreme Court, they have a lot of clout. They make decisions that impact all of our lives. They have a special advantage. They have a kind of an unusual amount of power and influence. The next word is devise, and devise is a verb, and it means to come up with, and usually in the context of like coming up with a plan. And so you might have two kids on a Friday afternoon at school trying to like devise a plan to get their parents to let them have a sleepover, right? Or in the context of like a company, maybe you have a team in a company that's trying to devise some kind of strategy to sell a product or to reach more customers or improve their image. So just devise is just a verb that means to come up with and typically a plan. The next word is empirical. This describes anything that is derived from experience, observation, or because you conducted an experiment of some kind. So it's not just like an idea that's unsubstantiated, right? It's not just something that you think, it's something you have seen, something you have experienced, something you have witnessed during an experiment. That is going to be described as empirical. So you might have empirical data, empirical evidence that you have gathered from observation or an experiment or your lived experience. Fiscal is an adjective, again, a describing word that describes something that is related to the government and in particular, like the government and money. So you'll hear a lot about fiscal, like spending, fiscal responsibility, right? The government spends money on things like Social Security and Medicare to kind of take care of more vulnerable parts of our population. You know, as people age, we want to make sure they have healthcare, access to affordable healthcare. As they get older, we want to give them Social Security to help support them in case they don't have a lot of retirement. And that's part of the government's fiscal responsibility, their financial responsibility. Incite is a verb, and it means to encourage something or to stir up. So in a classroom, maybe you have a sub for the day and you have one kid in your class who's like inciting the class to misbehave. They're kind of like encouraging the people around them to act in a way that you normally wouldn't act if your teacher was there. Similarly, there are, you know, if you're in a country where there's unrest, there's a lot of like tension, there may be kind of an opposition leader who's inciting people to revolt against the government. And so that could cause a lot of tension. You might have to have like a riot squad out to deal with that kind of revolt that has been incited by some kind of opposition leader. Modify is a verb, and to modify something means you're going to change it, you're going to alter it in some way, you're going to tweak it. So it's any kind of a change. So to modify is to change. And so when I think about my time as an English teacher, I spend a lot of time giving feedback on student work. And the goal of feedback is to help support students so they can modify their writing or modify their approach to a project so that they will have a much stronger essay or a much stronger project or finished product at the end. So the goal is to help them kind of change and alter and tweak their work to improve it. Ornate describes anything that is highly detailed and decorated. So whenever I travel with my family, we'll go to museums and we'll see artwork and old pieces of furniture. And oftentimes the artwork is showing really ornate detail, or the buildings themselves on the outside. It's almost like too much for me. It almost looks too busy because it's so ornate, it's so ornate. There's so many details. There's so many little touches and pieces to the exterior of this building, right? You have stars, you have lion, you have angels, you have the concrete like carvings in there. It's just very detailed, very decorated. Plausible is an adjective, and anything that is described as plausible is reasonable. It could be true, right? So if you guys have ever played that game, Two Truths and a Lie, it's a icebreaker activity that a lot of teachers will use to get to know their students. The goal of Two Truths and a Lie is to come up with 3 statements that all seem plausible. Like they could all be possibly true, but one of them is actually not true. But the more plausible they all seem, the harder it will be for somebody to figure out which one of those 3 statements is actually a lie, right? Also, when you think about a courtroom, the lawyers are trying to create a plausible argument, one that the jury will believe is true and that sounds really reasonable.